Hey everybody, welcome into the RotoWire Fantasy Football Podcast. John McKechnie and Mario Puig with you. This podcast presented by our friends over at Dynasty Owner. Today we're going to get into some rookie running back discussion, a lot of open-ended stuff. Once you get into that second tier, we're also going to do a little bit of a news roundup with a couple of notable signings over the last week or so. Let's start the show. Welcome into the RotoWire Fantasy Football Podcast. I believe my co-host has dropped off briefly, but Mario.
Internet browser did a cool trick right after it went live. Sorry about
that. Technology's ability to time stuff up is always they have the best comedic timing. The machines.
It's been trying to take us down. The tech gods are trying to not let us broadcast this, but we just keep stiff arming them into the dirt.
I think that the technology is Earl Thomas and we're Derrick Henry going to the outside at full steam.
Yeah, I would even say we're Greg Jones decapitating Dexter Reed at Florida State, North Carolina 22 years ago or whatever that was.
There's a little throwback. Speaking of 22 years ago, you see that there's going to be an ESPN 30 for 30 on the 2000 Ravens.
I mean, that's kind of interesting. I didn't realize there was so much to sort out there. I thought the story was pretty simple, just like insane defense, hurls Trent Dilfer, over the finish line using a catapult.
Yeah, it basically, has provided barroom fodder for the last almost quarter century.
What they should do is a 30 for 30 just about that week one game against the Jaguars. That's what a whole 30 for 30 should be about.
I told the crowd to keep believing. I was there. Ravens were down. But a little 8 or 9 year-old me knew
everyone was just
like,
God, I hate this kid so much.
But almost certainly right. In hindsight. Me and my cool little purple camo pants.
Got the job done.
It did, and the rest of it was history. And at that point, the Jags had completely owned the Ravens throughout their brief existence. Not that the Jags have been around much longer, but they were the kind of juggernaut, the bully on the block at that point. Hard to believe now, as current states are with the Jaguars. But there was a time when they were really, really effing good. Certainly not
Tom Coughlin even.
Yeah. Tom Coughlin, Mark Brunell, Fragile Fred. Jimmy Smith. I mean, the list goes on.
Jimmy Smith had 300 yards in that one game.
Yeah, so we can do the name and guys pod will be on the Patreon later. But anywho, let's get into some rookie running backs, because I don't know about yourself, but I've done a couple of best ball drafts. We've got a RotoWire rookie draft going on. It's a mock, but it's got a bunch of guys on staff: Jeff Erickson, Alan Zaslowski, Joe Bartle, yourself, myself, Jim Coventry, a handful of other guys in there. So it's been interesting to see how the rookie running backs are shaking out, but both in those rookie drafts and then how you see it play out in best ball formats. And a guy that I've noticed a good bit of hype on, he's a prospect that I liked, and I thought the landing spot, just as a knee-jerk reaction, what was pretty solid for him. And I'm talking about Rashad White going to Tampa Bay. But then you zoom it out, look at the broader context. James Cook goes to Buffalo a little bit earlier in the draft, and you see Damian Pierce. You see that pathway to carries, because there's really no locked in starter there in Houston. So as it stands, Mario, what are your views on Rashad White? If you could take a step back, give us your thoughts on him during your prospect analysis, and then how does he fit into that second tier of rookie running backs? Obviously, with the first tier being Breece Hall and Kenneth Walker. If you really wanted to get granular, Hall in a tier of his own, Kenneth Walker tier of his own, and then everything else.
Yeah, I thought that was a good pick by Tampa Bay. I think Rashad White is a much better candidate to do the pass catching specialist kind of things than Gio Bernard, who I'm sure Gio Bernard's like a total pro and everything, and there's some reason why he keeps getting
the mustache.
The mustache cannot hurt. And in addition to that, I'm assuming he's like a very professional, good clubhouse kind of guy to have. But on the field, he's about as pointless as it gets. Like, I don't know if he lost something with those knee injuries back in the day or what, but Gio Bernard was not a threat with the ball. He didn't do anything. He can't do anything at this point. Rashad White can definitely do something more with what Gio Bernard got last year, and he can, by merit, earn more usage in the first place. So I definitely think he's the off the bench back for Tampa Bay, and over Keyshawn Vaughn. Even like I don't think Keyshawn Vaughn's really, anything. So Fournette is definitely locked in. I don't think Rashad White's going to take a whole lot from him. I think this is more like Fournette is pretty much a workhorse for 40, maybe 45, 50 snaps a game even. And then White gets pretty much everything else. And I think at once he'll be good at that, but also he's not likely to take a whole lot more than that, especially if Fournette's healthy. Even if they move on from Fournette in a few years, I'm not really sure White's a starter candidate. Like if you're in an offense that throws the ball, I don't know, 40 times a game and only runs at 25, maybe in that offense, Rashad White would be a starter. But to me, he's basically Tony Pollard, which is to say you probably don't want to give him more than 25 snaps a game usually, even though you have a lot of reason to think those 25 snaps will be good ones.
Yeah, that's a good way of putting it, especially, with this Tampa Bay offense. I think when I was writing up the rookies for the magazine, I saw that I think Tampa Bay had the second fewest or the fewest rushing attempts in all of football last year. So obviously it's a super pass-first offense, and Leonard Fournette is a pretty, as long as he stays healthy, then he's a pretty, sizable block to White. But I don't think that there's anything at this stage that Fournette does that Rashad White can't really do. Rashad White, kind of like a uniquely good pass catcher. That was something that took Fournette a while to really, learn to be effective at this level. But Rashad White, as far as like the yards per target efficiency during his time at Arizona State, I think he was over 10 yards a target. 58 targets at Arizona State over 2 seasons, 607 receiving yards, and he caught 51 of those 58 targets. So I think he's uniquely good at that. But he's also, unlike a Gio Bernard, someone who, 6'2", 210, that's a little bit of a tall and
he got to 6'2". Dang.
Or at least maybe Arizona State had him listed. I'm looking at his college page on RotoWire.
Yeah, 6'1", 210 or whatever is still kind of string-beanish by running back standards. So I agree, though. One thing about White, too, is I guess I don't know for sure if he did this at Arizona State, but I do think he would be a candidate to line up as even like a slot receiver kind of thing, whereas Gio Bernard is only a shovel pass guy. So I think White could be, threatening in a good number of ways. And like you said, his Arizona State production is really good, including as a runner. Like he had, 2 years ago? He only had like 8 carries a game and he'd go like 10 yards a pop. And then they gave him about like 16 a game last year. And it dropped to 5.5 or something, but he had a ton of touchdowns. So that pretty much explains it to me. When you have like 15 touchdowns and 200 carries, the defense is not tackling you that much. It's the end zone tackling you a lot of the time. So I think I rate Rashad White better than I did Tony Pollard as a prospect. It's just that I compared to him in that I think he'll give you good, clearly good production up to something like 400 snaps. And I do worry about his ability to take on volume beyond that. But if his body holds up and if he doesn't get gassed, playing, then his skills, I definitely think, play pretty much all the time.
I do too. So I find myself being pretty interested in him. I'm not going to tease myself into thinking that, he's going to take over for Leonard Fournette barring an injury or that this offense changes in any meaningful way where all of a sudden there's, 15 extra carries per game to play around with and get distributed to Rashad White. But I do think that he's an improvement over what they had behind Fournette a year ago. And I think that in and of itself is pretty interesting. And when you can get him, his ADP looks like around pick 134. So right in the Darrell Henderson, James Robinson tier among running backs. And mind you, and this is drawing from NFC data dating back to the week of the draft. So this is pretty fresh. We have a decent sample there over the last 3 weeks or so to play around with. So you see Rashad White checking in at at that spot. And then you see James Cook, his ADP sticks at 100.
Yeah, I think, like, I get it why people are chasing Cook. I understand, especially if you haven't been following football that long and you're showing up and getting into fantasy football just in the last couple of years where there's this swell of content and, just philosophies being expressed in fantasy media that weren't a long time ago. I understand why, if all you think is important is draft capital and catching a lot of passes and this or those things along those lines, you would look at Cook and say, like, oh yeah, he's going to be a star, because I know second round draft capital means you gotta. We've established that if you spend a second round pick on a running back, you're a stupid team always, right? But the one way it's allowed is if it's a workhorse that you're pinning to it. So we know they're going to work James Cook on that basis, right? Well, no. And if you followed football longer, you would know why that's not going to happen. And it makes sense to chase, I guess, if you think, especially relative to White, if you for some reason think the Bills' offense is definitely better than the Buccaneers, but especially this year, I don't think that's true. I mean, the Bills and the Buccaneers are the two best offenses, probably, I would say, right now. So especially for this year, Rashad White is clearly preferable to James Cook, I think. And pertinently, Rashad White is in an offense that actually throws the ball to running backs. It doesn't matter what the Bills want to do. They can't throw the ball to running backs if they want to use Josh Allen as a runner the way they have. You have to make a different formation for the logistics of that to make any sense. So maybe Josh Allen stops running so much and James Cook gets a bunch of catches, but that's the only way it's happening. And with Rashad White's case, it's just kind of clearly evident how it could just organically come about without any sort of, paradigm shifts.
So with that in mind, how much do you envision the Buffalo offense changing, now that Dable isn't there?
Yeah, I don't know. They'd be foolish to change much. I mean, I think Dable did a really great job conceiving just a whole philosophy of just a structure that suits everything about Josh Allen and maximizes all of his strengths, minimizes all of his weaknesses. If they deviate from that at all, I think they're begging for a disaster, really. Not that they become a bad team or anything, but it's like they've established a very particularly high standard, and I don't know why they would mess with it. So if they want to have Allen run less, then the result of that would be defenses defend the run less and put more towards stopping the pass. And I don't think that would turn out that well for him. So they could try to change a bunch of looks that would have normally set up Allen to make the defense, pay for not putting a spy in the middle of the field to watch him as a runner. If they make it so that it's setting up the running back for a screen pass or shovel pass or whatever instead, it might not work as well as Josh Allen running the ball would, and B, they might actually put Allen in more difficult positions on the other snaps because the defense is going to have to adjust to that. So I don't know why they would mess with it. I guess I could imagine it as like, designing a couple screen passes a game for James Cook. But if they do that, defenses will quickly catch on that they don't run real playbook plays with him, and they'll just know to watch for his gadget plays. And him being on the field will always tip off that that's their intention. So when you look at that kind of logistical obstacle, and then when you look at how James Cook was always splitting the backfield, not just with Zamir White, who is a fourth round pick that I don't even think was a very notable fourth round pick talent wise. It's those other. There were like 3 underclassmen running backs that he was splitting carries with even 2 years ago. So
right, and it took him until his senior year to have more than, I think, 50 carries in a season.
Right.
So and he's someone who, like, I can't deny, and that I'm watching through red and black glasses this past year. Like, I thought that he was the most effective per play running back that Georgia had, but I knew that there would be a tipping point where, if James Cook is getting 20 carries in a game, like that's not going to lead to like him maintaining a 6 yards per carry average. Like you can't use him in that function. And frankly, like, I don't think that his play strength is all that good. Like, I don't think that he breaks tackles. He is. So like that,
he probably bulked up to get to 199,
I would think so. So with that in mind, like if he's having trouble breaking tackles at the college level, albeit against SEC competition, like I have concerns about him just being someone that immediately goes down upon contact once he gets to the NFL level. So I'm looking at Pro Football Focus right now. His yards after contact, he had 442 of them that ranked outside the top 100. He did average 3.9 yards after contact per attempt, which ranked pretty well. But
that'll be propelled by like 2 plays though on his low rushing
that's
volume.
what I'm thinking.
Yeah.
Right, like his big run against Alabama in the national title game, like someone might have grazed him in the backfield, and he's going 64 yards down the field. That can goose your average on that type of thing. So
I think James Cook is basically, for whatever good or bad it means to you, I think he's basically Justin Jackson.
Dang. Okay.
In the NFL, they were very different in college, but it's
sure.
Like, if James Cook had whatever coaches needed to see to put him on the field more, that would be, Justin Jackson, basically, I think.
That's a good comparison in the sense that, there was a time, like you said, people jumping in here, but 2 years ago there was like appeal and intrigue when it came to Justin Jackson. Like, if you were an Austin Eckler skeptic, then Justin Jackson was probably your guy.
Man, I can't remember some of the debates that have occurred over the years, but man, I know there was some amount of Eckler doubt. If there were actually people who were advocating Justin Jackson instead, oof. They should be glad that people like me forgot.
Yeah, and or guys like me aren't overly proficient at using the advanced search function on Twitter, that type of deal. So we've broken down the 2 of these guys. Let's get to Damian Pierce, because he's the other one that I find myself trying to get some exposure to thus far. He was the RB4 in our rookie draft. He went right before where I took Rashad White, and I was happy to get White with the 17th overall pick. So that is what, the 1, 2, 3, 4, the 5th pick of the second round, and Alan took Pierce with the 4th pick in the second round. And I wouldn't quibble too much with that. And I think that those are 2 guys that should go pretty much exactly in that range, and potentially even a little bit higher. It depends on if it's a super flex or not. That obviously alters how you want to approach those things. But Pierce is definitely interesting, and I think it's mostly, for me, team context driven. But there's team context things that are also working against the Texans' run game. First of all, I don't really know how this offense is going to look under Pep Hamilton. He's the offensive coordinator, correct?
I actually don't know. That sounds right.
Yes,
I haven't paid much attention to the Jack Easterby, Nick Caserio production, but yeah, I guess I should know that one.
Well, I guess theoretically, Lovie Smith would be like, let's run the ball more. But Texans, I feel like are going to be a bad team, of course, and I think that that therein lies the issue of them likely playing from behind a lot. So they're not going to really have like the luxury, as it were, to go for a hefty rushing split compared to their passing split. I think that Davis Mills is going to be pretty busy this year. So there's that in mind to consider, of course. But I do think that Pierce, by like mid-season, I think should be getting the bulk of the carries for the Texans. And that in and of itself is interesting, even if I think that, his talent is good, but nothing like spectacular.
Yeah, Pierce is interesting. I don't know if I quite agree with some of the swings people are making. I think there's some reaching going on with him quite a bit. I understand why. I know why a person might knowingly reach at that point. Like especially if you went, really wide receiver and tight end heavy earlier, and you're there in the 7th or 8th round, you probably don't gain that much by taking a 6th receiver or whatever at that point. So you might kind of be cornered into just saying, I'll just take some running back that I think could maybe play 3 downs for some team. And Pierce does meet that standard. I just wonder, like you said, certainly about the team's overall deal. I don't know what they think they're going to do, what they're actually going to do, how much disconnect there might be between what they think they're going to do and what's actually going to be available to them when they get there. I don't know. I do like Pierce, though, quite a bit more than the 3rd round running backs, Brian Robinson and the LSU one. I think that Pierce is clearly an NFL running back, and the question is just kind of like how good of one he can be. There's a lot of like non-applicable grades I think you have to put in his profile, because he was always in a rotation at Florida, which doesn't need to mean that he's bad, especially when it's like, he's losing carries to upperclassmen LaMichael Pirine, and there's that other one I can't remember the name of.
Malik Davis.
There was even a time where he was splitting carries with like Kadarius Toney. So it's like when you're
Dan Mullen also. The Dan Mullen thing, I think, is an important. Like, if you want to ding him for Dan Mullen, and look at him now. Like that guy is a clown, and he's fired.
Yeah, he used to pull Dak Prescott in the first drives of games at Mississippi State to rotate some other quarterback in that I can't remember, and he was like, "No, this is smart. I'm getting everybody fresh all the time this way. It's so good.
Got to keep my quarterback fresh."
Yeah, it's goofy. Some coaches just think it's awesome to rotate players. They don't even care what the position is; they just love it. I think with Pierce though, we have to give him a certain amount of like positive grade for his production, even though it wasn't voluminous, because he did pass every test that he was given. He didn't fail at anything. He was always really reliable producer. I would grade his production as clearly the best in that Florida backfield. So I do think he was the best player there, and stuff like that does matter to me. I think that he would have gotten more playing time if the playing time had been handed out on the basis of merit rather than Mullen's goofy ideas. So I think Pierce could be a really good player. It's just hard to tell for sure. And the tools don't really make you lean that way. I mean, the 4.6 or whatever, I think he's basically a 4.68, 4.7 kind of guy. So if I'm forced to make a comparison, I'm thinking along the lines of like Alfred Morris or something like that. Like a guy who could make quite a dent. Not that he's going to, lead the league in rushing like the Mike Shanahan instance of Alfred Morris. I mean, more like the Alfred Morris we look back on rather than what people were thinking he was at his highest point. It's just like a guy who, if he ends up in a good situation, might do a totally good job, but basically needs a little luck to get there. I do think Pierce has 3-down ability. He didn't get a high workload at Florida, but I think his frame can handle it. The question is like, was his good production at Florida only good because he was running at 125% every play?
Like the Chris Ivory.
Yeah, and it's one thing if you can keep that guy in an abbreviated role so he can always play at 125%, but if you take that player and make him play 40 snaps a game, he might just burn out after like 25, 30 snaps a lot of the time. So if he loses something with volume, then he's not good enough. But if he can maintain what he's shown over a longer sample, then I think Pierce could be good. So I definitely like him a lot more than I've seen Robinson go ahead of him. I've seen the LSU back go within like 3 rounds of him or something like that. And that's wrong. Pierce is definitely better than those two by quite a lot.
Yeah, I think that's a really interesting distinction when it comes to Pierce, because I think sometimes, and myself included, can fall into that trap of like, oh, he was underused. And, if you're getting 6.5 yards per carry, that clearly he must just like be ready to maintain that efficiency if the workload increases by X percent. So that's good to remind yourself once in a while that the longer sample can have the regression come along with it, and all of a sudden
some guys burn faster than others. It's like sometimes a guy can take 40 snaps after playing 20, and the other guy, if you give him 40 snaps after playing 20, he just gets himself hurt.
Mm-hmm. So that's a good note there. I think, that will be kind of potentially the determining factor as to whether he can really take on that number one role in Houston. But as it stands and at cost right now, I'm willing to make that bet. Like if he's my 4th running back on my roster in the 11th round or something, I'm probably looking at Pierce and relative to some of those other guys, like probably more so than like an Alexander Madison or a Ronald Jones.
Yeah, and for what it's worth, I would still try to get Rex Burkhead if possible. I think he's going to be the other one. If there's a problem for Pierce in that backfield, I think it's Burkhead rather than Mack, just because Mack's never really been a passing down guy, and I don't know how much Mack has left after that Achilles tear. I guess we'll see. He was pretty good before; he wasn't bad before, but Burkhead is definitely their best passing down guy aside from Pierce.
Okay, all right. So that's important as well. So to kind of recap. Right now, as far as ADP is concerned, James Cook going the highest of this 3. around pick 100. Damian Pierce, 123 is his ADP, and Rashad White, 134.
Yeah, those are good. The last two are good. The first one was bad.
First one, indeed, bad. That gets the official stamp from us. Before we get on to a couple other rookie running backs of note, quick message from our friends over at Blue Wire. And a quick message from our friends over at Dynasty Owner. Do you love fantasy sports? Are you ready for a new challenge this year? Dynasty Owner is the new way to play fantasy football with real NFL salaries, adding the strategy of running an actual franchise. Dynasty Owner provides a unique and challenging experience that will test your skills as an owner and general manager. You will have complete control over your team's future. You can build through the draft, make trades, sign free agents, and manage your team's salary cap. Can you create a dynasty of champions? Sign up now at dynastyowner.com and start building your dynasty today. All right, let's get to a couple other rookie running backs. Let's unpack Zamir White because I think that he's basically, skill set wise, kind of redundant to Josh Jacobs. But Jacobs hasn't always been like the picture of health. I think I've seen a decent amount of discourse this year when it comes to Jacobs. And obviously I'm not saying anything to the effect of like Zamir White's gonna take carries off of Josh Jacobs' plate as long as Josh Jacobs is active. But I think that there's been, I'm interested to see where you land on this, where there's a contention that the Raiders are really going to go like heavy Josh Jacobs because they didn't pick up his 5th-year option. This is his walk year. They're just going to kind of ride him until the tires come off.
Yeah, it could be that. I don't really know how to guess what the Raiders are doing or what they think they're doing. White's a tough prospect for me to figure out too. Like I'm pretty sure he's not that great, but he might be good enough to be a player who thrives, especially for if it's just a year or two in a big role. Like maybe he can just do the, check the box, basically do whatever that team needs if they don't need him to be a star. I do worry that that's not even an option though, given his durability troubles in college. And then as far as a change of pace player, I know he was given the 4.4 flat 40 time at the combine, but I basically don't believe it. I think he's a 4.5 flat guy, which is fine at about 215 or whatever he was, but he is a little bit upright for a guy who's basically a grinder between the tackles, and he's got that established injury history already. So I think he'll be the kind of guy who's good with the ball. Like when he gets a carry, he's probably going to do a good job with it. I just don't know if he can give you that many for a handful of reasons. I don't know. Like the Damian Pierce thing is there with him too, in that he never had a big workload in college. But I think unlike Pierce, we have prior reason to believe that it's because of limitations rather than because of like a team strategy thing.
Right. I think if Zamir White never got hurt his freshman year, we would have seen him get over 200 carries a couple of times. I just don't think that there's really a whole lot of question about that. And then you also tack on the fact that he injured his ACL his last year of high school as well. So there, of course, Georgia's not going to just like completely run him into the ground. And, 160 carries over 15 games this past season is really not that heavy of a workload. And frankly, Georgia had the luxury of emptying the bench in the second half of a lot of their games. So it just didn't make sense for them to, leave Zamir White out there in the fourth quarter against UAB or something like that. So I don't know that distilling down the reason for why his workload looked the way it did, it can be a little bit tricky. Did have 11 touchdowns in back-to-back seasons when he was kind of like starting to
did a good
look
job.
healthy.
Yeah,
I just feel like he's like a relic of a past type of running back that isn't all that useful in the NFL anymore. I think he's kind of stiff. I think maybe there is a way in which like the 4.4 speed shows itself, but it takes so many other conditions being met. It takes like him having a really good amount of build up, a lot of runway for him to get there. And I don't think he creates that on his own. So I think,
I think he's pretty linear.
A problem.
Like he runs hard, but he's just kind of going in a straight line.
Yeah. So he's a punishing, bruising back. And like, I was encouraged by the testing overall at the combine. I don't really see that high of a ceiling for him, which is unfortunate because when he was in high school, his nickname was Zeus. I guess it still is Zeus, but I mean, I thought he was going to be the next big thing, but the knee injuries just kind of altered everything.
He's the kind of guy who's much more interesting as a DFS spot start than like a long-term fantasy asset.
Okay, so do you see yourself getting much in the way of exposure to Zamir White? He's going.
No, I think I don't expect him to even necessarily play. Like if Kenyon Drake is still on that roster, White might be a healthy scratch.
So that's a problem. So he's pick 187 right now. This is ADP.
Nah.
Meh. And apparently Alec Pierce is going one spot ahead of him. Obviously, different position, but I'm taking Alec Pierce.
Give
11
you the
times
Pierce
out
pick
of 10.
for sure. Yeah, that's a much better one.
Yes. Which other rookie running back did you want to get into?
I know we've talked to Kevin Harris a good amount on here. I think he's basically deferred. Like unless Ramondre Stevenson or Damian Harris gets hurt in training camp, Harris is probably going to get a red shirt. But if he does play, I think he could be the second best running back in this class. No lower than the third, in my opinion. We kind of skipped Isaiah Spiller. There's been a lot of commentary on him. I think his landing spot was really good with the Chargers, and I thought Josh Kelly was going to be a better player than he's been, but he's been awful. So I don't need to think Spiller's particularly good to think Spiller's going to push him aside for that kind of rushing specialist role. The fourth rounder that I would worry about ever really playing much in the NFL is Hassan Haskins from Michigan, who the Titans took. They already blew it the last time they tried to get a backup running back in the draft, spent a third rounder on Darrington Evans, who, he was a fine pick, but Haskins is not a fine pick. There was no reason to take him in the fourth round. They ran out Deontay Foreman, who's clearly better, and signed a pretty close to veteran minimum deal with the Panthers. And then they spent this fourth rounder, which is clearly worth more than the contract that they could have given Foreman. So I'd worry about pretty much every aspect of Tennessee's judgment right now. And I would not go thinking Haskins replaces Derrick Henry. If Derrick Henry misses time, I think it's going to be pretty much whoever else is laying around.
Well, and I think that there's also the element of Haskins just not being able. There's only certain things that he can do. Like, is he like a powerful runner? Yes, but like I don't think that there's much more to his game.
He might run like a 4.8, man. He never even ran. It's ridiculous. It was a bad pick.
I think a lot of his numbers last year were goosed by the fact that Michigan had the Joe Moore award-winning offensive line. That's the best offensive line in college football.
He runs hard. He's tough as hell, and he's gonna make people bring him down. I just don't think he's gonna get very far before that happens.
No, so a lot of getting tackled at the line of scrimmage for him. So yeah, I'm not overly interested in him either. Let's go ahead, shift gears. Some news and notes from around the league. Wanted to start things off in Denver and give you the chance to either inflate a hype balloon for one of these guys or pop one for the other. But what's the latest with these Denver tight ends?
Well, you're going to see fantasy sites pick up more and more in the upcoming days. This post from Ryan O'Halloran at Denver Post or something like that, some Denver thing he works for. He's been a reporter for a lot of years at different places. So he's a total, pro journalist and everything. There's no reason to think that he's making things up or whatever, but he said in this article from a reader, like a mailbag question, like, who do you think is going to start at tight end? And he responded, well, I thought it was going to be Albert Okwuegbunam, but after hearing Nathaniel Hackett talk about Greg Dulcich, the third rounder from UCLA, in this rookie mini camp thing, now I've changed my mind to Dulcich. And it's like, this is a rookie camp. Albert Okwuegbunam is not there.
Right.
Of course, they're going to talk about Dulcich. They're not going to take a press question like, "What do you think about Dulcich?" Like, let's talk about Okwuegbunam instead. I don't want to talk about Greg. No, of course they're going to say, "Oh, we love Greg. Greg's the man," and Greg's a good pick. He's a good player probably. Keep an eye on it though, because people are also starting to do Gardner Minshew epic bacon mustache things with him. So that's going to be obnoxious if that really takes off. But it's a rookie camp, they can't talk about Albert Okwuegbunam. Them talking about Dulcich is the most meaningless thing that could possibly be. It's like they have to talk about him. So I wouldn't take much from that. What I would otherwise ask people to think about is, where else did you think that pick was supposed to go with the Broncos? Like, they were already pretty well set at pretty much every position. It makes sense to add a good a mid-third round pick tight end when you only have Okwuegbunam otherwise. Like, they have no tight end depth. Even aside from those two, it's like I don't even know who the third tight end is going to be on that team.
The ghost of Jake Butt.
Yeah, it's like they would have had some nobody playing as like a 400 snap role if they didn't take Dulcich. So that's the pick. That's what I think he's going to do. And the thing you hear Hackett say about Dulcich especially is like, oh, he's a vertical threat. So if they want a vertical threat, don't you think it might be pertinent that Albert Okwuegbunam runs a 4.49 40 and Dulcich runs a 4.7, even though Albert Okwuegbunam is 15 pounds heavier? And that was Dulcich's like build-up weight probably. Like he might have been more like 230 or something when he played at UCLA, where he was basically a wide receiver. So we'll see if Dulcich can keep getting open in the NFL with NFL linebackers running with him rather than college ones, and or NFL corners and safeties after beating the ones in college. He's got something to him. His production was very good. I wouldn't say it's that much better than especially Caleb Wilson, but even Devin Asiasi. Those two put up numbers at UCLA and haven't done anything in the NFL. So I think Okwuegbunam being such a singular class of athlete is lost on a lot of people. Like, I ran that Pro Football Reference query back before they put up the paywall, but so I can't run it again right now. But they had this record that showed nobody over 250 pounds ran something like a sub 4.5 except first round picks at defensive end and Albert Okwuegbunam. So that only happened like 5 times. That they were all other first round athletes. Okwuegbunam has been one of the best per snap producers at tight end in his 2 years. He has gotten injured, that's true, but him getting injured is not the same as a reason to believe that he's going to lose to Dulcich. Like, they're going to get into camp and they're going to be like, hey, this guy who's like 20 pounds heavier than the other is way faster than the other one too. What do you think about that, Hackett? He's not just going to say like, put Dulcich out there. We don't care about any of that. We just need that mustache on the field. Like, no, you're going to want someone who's almost 260 pounds running a sub 4.5 running down the seam, because defenses don't want that.
And I touched on this briefly last week, but what are your thoughts on Hackett and his 2 tight end usage in Green Bay versus?
Well, that's the other thing, man. They spent the Packers spent a 3rd rounder on Jay Sternberger, and then like the next year a 3rd rounder on Josiah DeGuara, and they had about 400 snaps those 2 years for both of them. So don't get me wrong, Dulcich is probably a better prospect, certainly better than DeGuara. Better than Sternberger, requires a little hindsight, I think, because Sternberger was very
Sternberger
productive.
was super awesome his 1 year at A&M.
Yeah, so Dulcich could be better than them both, but like, what the Albert Okwuegbunam had one of the highest routes per run last year among tight ends. The same was true the year before. Both the years he drew targets at a per snap rate that is noticeably very high. Hackett has to talk about Dulcich right now, but wait till he actually sees Albert Okwuegbunam before you think what he thinks about him, because Hackett's gonna probably cornball out about him too. He's gonna be like, oh my god, he's such a big guy, he's so fast. I don't know what he's gonna have some stupid little, I don't know, joke about The Hangover or something. Like he's always got like the office humor. He's always got his little bits going on. Let's see what wacky stuff he has to say about Albert Okwuegbunam before we just assume that he doesn't think he's epic too.
And then if we want to like keep playing like the mental gymnastics games for like the thought processes in Denver, what does it say that they traded Noah Fant and kept Albert O?
Right, that's the thing. That trade happened before they drafted Dulcich, so they waited till the 3rd round, I'm to believe, to get their actual crucial tight end replacement. Like, they went into the 3rd round willing to be like playing chicken with that question of going into the year with 0 at tight end versus the one guy that they needed and are now committed to entirely. I don't think it seems unlikely to me. I don't know.
So yeah, I'm definitely getting a decent amount of Albert O this year. I think I wrote him up as my favorite steal from the, spoiler alert for the RotoWire Fantasy Football magazine on newsstands this summer. But I said that the steal of the PPR draft was indeed Albert O in the 9th round, I think.
Nice. Yeah, I mean, I do worry about his durability, but people have been looking for so many reasons since that 11. He caught 11 touchdowns on 26 catches as a redshirt freshman at Missouri, and ever since then, people like put a lot of hype on him at that one point, like maybe he'd be the next Gronk. And then he kind of had some ugly years as the Missouri offense fell apart, and then he fell to the late 4th round. And once he fell to the late 4th, people were just like invested in the idea of him being bad, and I don't know. It's fine to just admit that we missed him. He should have been a 2nd round pick. Guys that big and fast are too good to leave on the bench.
Yeah, I think if I'm putting the timelines together correctly, but I think Albert O was like kind of the headliner of the Missouri game that kind of ended up getting Brett Bielema fired like on the field.
I don't remember that
correctly. Like it was like the day after Thanksgiving a couple years ago, and like Albert O just like torched Arkansas or something. I might be misremembering it, but something along those lines happened.
Yeah, it's funny too because before the combine, the line on Albert Quaidwin was like, "Oh, he's a big lumbering guy who could just catch touchdowns. He can't do anything else." And then he runs a 4.49, and people are like, well, "I was still right. He's still slow." Like, no, man, he's not. It's an optical illusion. He's fast.
5 for 63 and 2 touchdowns against Arkansas that year. And then Burt got canned, and then Arkansas hired Chad Morris, and that was a total disaster. But now the Hogs are doing good.
I posted something on Twitter. I'll probably get it pushed back with useless crap by the time anyone can look at it. But I took a shot from this one play last year where Quaidwin had one of his biggest catches, probably the longest catch. And there's this safety for the Eagles who's got an angle on him about he's about 5 to 8 yards laterally away and about 10 yards linearly away. And Albert Quaidwin should have been tackled there after about 4 more yards, basically. And instead he goes 55 or something before the safety, who first gets the angle broke, manages to catch up and barely stop the touchdown.
And mind you, again, that's post ACL, Alberto, right?
Oh, yeah. I forgot about the ACL.
So he still got it. Is what we're saying. That
was a quick recovery too.
Yeah, seriously, like that was very, very fast.
I thought he was going to miss the first 6 weeks, and he missed nothing.
What a stud! Alberto cast. Let's get on over to New Orleans. Something that I think like at first I was like, oh crap, because I've been so heavily invested in Chris Olave so far in drafts. But, Jarvis Landry, he was going to sign somewhere, is going to bum everyone out somewhere. But what does that really change as far as the New Orleans offense? I think it just gives them more depth in the, short intermediate passing game. But I think that if they were going to have Chris Olave play the Jarvis Landry role, then like something would have been totally wrong there.
Yeah, they were confused about something there if they're putting Olave on the bench for a slot receiver. No, they're gonna function in different parts of the field, and Olave is going to have a near monopoly. Other than when what is his name, Deontay Harris, is that the 5'6" one? When he's on the field for his 20 or so snaps per game, he gets targeted downfield, and he gets targeted quite a bit in general. But other than him, it's going to be basically Olave with a near monopoly on everything further than 12 yards, and he'll be quite good at that, by the way. I think Jarvis Landry is a problem for maybe Michael Thomas because I know it's the slot in Landry's case, and Thomas mostly runs slants outside, but they're going to be running at the same depth more or less, like 8 yards off the line of scrimmage. So if somebody's getting pinched for Landry's arrival, I think the way plays tend to develop, the way the routes tend to interact, that's sooner going to be a problem for Thomas, who being at the same depth is more likely to end up being like you can't have the two be the read right after each other. It's like one's got to be the primary, and then there's got to be some kind of element where the quarterback can work away from that depth if the defense is crowding that part of the field. So I think Thomas tends to win at Landry's expense. Maybe the passing game is so good there's room for both, but I don't think it's Olave's problem either way. And I think it's a good signing for the Saints. It's the other thing to mention, though. They either have to completely reconfigure their slot receiver role, or Landry's just not going to get targets. The slot receiver role with the Saints has basically been a decoy since like Willie Snead. So they had all those bums like Lil Jordan Humphrey and Austin Carr, all those guys playing and never getting targets no matter how many snaps they play. That's where Jarvis Landry is stepping in, and he's not going to play for no targets. They got to reconfigure something.
Sure. So, any sort of Olave panic in regards to the Landry signing.
I like the Saints now, man. They got a good defense that they can't screw up, and I really think Jameis Winston, without Sean Payton, it's a lot worse. Don't get me wrong. I'd much rather see Sean Payton there, but
sure,
it's got really good receivers to throw to now.
I mean, if Michael Thomas is even like 80% of what he was a couple of years ago, all of a sudden this offense that was kind of unwatchable last year at times suddenly becomes pretty interesting. Let's round things out. There was one notable signing earlier Wednesday on the defensive side, so not so much a fantasy discussion here, but really shrewd move by the Eagles to pick up James Bradbury, give someone on the opposite side of Darius Slay. And I think I saw a tweet where they're paying him less than the Giants are this year.
Yeah, that's how you got to do it. Get your divisional rivals to pay you to have one of their former best players on your team at a position of desperate need, mind you. The Eagles they still have a bad corner depth element. Like Darius Slay, James Bradbury is pretty nasty. This is starting 2 boundary corners. I even think Avonte Maddox might be a pretty good slot specialist, but they might need to reconsider him too, because when the Buccaneers kept putting Evans in the slot and they just had nothing to do there, a big guy he can't cover. So they still have to figure out their depth at corner. But Bradbury, Slay at outside, that can lock down a lot of offenses. And there's a nasty pass rush waiting to happen in that defense too. Getting Jordan Davis next to Fletcher Cox, and they got Josh Sweat outside. This defense could be pretty nasty. I definitely think the Eagles are good. Along with the Colts and the AFC, I think the Eagles are very interesting Super Bowl bets just because a combination of like low competition, especially in the Colts case, of course, but the Eagles is like they got a strong defense in the division full of phonies who always, blow it every year. And then they got AJ Brown catching play action passes on the other side. That's tough. That's a team you don't want to see late in the year.
No. So Eagles definitely trending up. I do kind of, that's a good way to put it where they have similar paths in front of them and similar like positive ingredients when it comes to Indianapolis and Philly. So Philly had one major hole to fill there post-draft, and they got it. And, maybe if one of the top elite corners, a Sauce Gardner or Derek Stingley, if they were available when the Eagles were picking, maybe that would have made some more sense over Jordan Davis, but obviously they weren't.
Davis is going to be a monster. Him and Cox are going to – and they have Hargreaves.
They got Nakobe Dean in the late 3rd round, and he's already like practicing. So
yeah, the Eagles are pretty loaded aside from corner. So if that one problem doesn't get them – and again, their starting 2 are very strong. It's like 3 through 4 that you wonder about, and that's, I guess, maybe a small problem to have.
They just can't have the Marcus Peters, Marlon Humphrey incidents of a year ago, and this should be all
exactly,
right. Yeah. All right, that's going to wrap it up for us here at the RotoWire Fantasy Football Podcast. Again, brought to you by our friends over at Dynasty Owner. For Mario Puig, I'm John McKechnie. Thanks for listening.
Try RotoWire today, free for 10 days. Get our premium tools, rankings, analysis, and breaking news alerts. No credit card required. Go to rotowire.com/try.